Comes to love, it is also hard for us to find love. But then I remind myself na even in my leadership now, when I look at my community, when I go back to the roots of why I am standing here, when times hit na parang I feel like it is depressing to be single, I have no one with me, I always remind myself that I do not stand here alone. I am so full of love and support from the whole collective aspect of our community. And I know that in my endeavors as a trans youth, the spirits of my Babaylan ancestors are guiding me. I believe that trans community is a really solid community. Katulad nga nung sabi sa post, no matter how we compete with each other, when someone tries to attack our community, we come together like an army. We come together like a solid force, united. That is how I view love as well. Everything is always beyond ourselves. It is not just constrained to our individual identities, but our united identity through our collective efforts. My aspiration for my community is for us to realize of how great our collective power is, and for us to come together despite of our differences and go beyond our sectors, go beyond our identity politics, and to find denomination with other sectors of our society and make them realize of how our plight to gender is also the same as theirs, to find unity amidst this great intersectionality that we have. Only through materializing that can we truly win as a community and soon enough as a society. The systems that oppresses trans community is largely rooted to the same larger oppressive systems that oppresses our farmers, our youth, our workers, women in general. It is macho feudalism, not just patriarchy alone. And more so, this is also connected to bigger systems of oppression, which is also connected to the death anniversary of Jennifer Laude, which is bureaucrat capitalism and imperialism. And that is also why I am grateful that we were able to raise the case of Jennifer Laude, not just to mourn about it, but to spark the revolutionary spirits of one another. This shows that the system will never really grant us justice or the conditions that we ask for unless we assert for it, unless we demand for it. The case of Jennifer Laude is largely rooted to the same systemic oppression that is faced by the other sectors of our community. When I hear the Jennifer Laude's name, it always brings me back to how rotten, to how absurd imperialism is. Pemberton was able to just come here in the Philippines, do those atrocities, and just leave without any accountability. Just as how the imperialism of the US randomly comes in our community, takes our raw materials, capitalizes on it, puts up neoliberal policies, exploits our workers, exploits our natural resources and people. When I hear Jennifer Laude, it makes me sad, makes me feel scared that anytime that could happen to any trans woman, that anytime that could happen to me. Aside from that, it more so gives me that revolutionary spark in myself to take those systems, to take Pemberton accountable. And more than us being depressed of it, it should make us more firm of our stand, make us more firm of our places in the society. Na instead of us feeling fear of it, dapat ay manatili tayong nakahanay para bawiin ang ating mga naratibo. The story of Jennifer Laude has been played dirty by our reactionary forces as well, taking account on her being a sex worker. But we should always remember that it is not a matter of justifying the morality or the ethics of being a sex worker, but what has pushed people to resort to that. It is never just a choice alone. Because just as imperialism, its neoliberal policies gives us the illusion of choice, why we are being pushed to make these decisions. We should also be reminded na hindi sapat yung working conditions, kahit sa academic conditions para sa trans people. It was never our fault as members of the trans community, as members of the LGBTQ plus community, to be faced with these inhumane conditions. They are the ones who need changing more than ourselves. Well, first off, the very remarks of Duterte alone, which are misogynistic, largely affects us trans people because transphobia is rooted to misogyny, and as it poses dangers to women, more so it affects or poses dangers to trans people in general. And on the aspect of health, a lot of trans people weren't able to access to their gender affirming hormonal therapy, to consultations because of the ongoing pandemic. And other trans people who are positive with HIV or are taking antiretroviral treatment, or were also not able to have that better access to it because of the never-ending lockdowns that we have, and more so yung panawagan natin sa pagbabakuna at sa mass testing ay hindi natutugunan sa mga miyembro ng LGBTQIA+ community. It is also important for us to gain access to it. Pero because of the current response na palpak, misplaced priorities ng government when it comes to the pandemic, we're not able to gain access to it. Also, this poses a grave call sa ating community na health as a right ay hindi dapat siya passively inaantay. Ito ay dapat ina-assert. Thus, there is a grave call for us to get out the comforts of our homes and or ivory towers and march along the basic masses in demanding for it. Staying at home will not grant us safety in this pandemic. Kasi kalakan pa rin ng ating mga budget na pupunta sa NTFL CAC. So makikita natin na misplaced ang priorities ng government natin, and we were never their priority. We were never, our safety, our alleviation from this pandemic was never their agenda. And thus, hindi dapat nating passively inaantay yung ating karapatan sa health. Dapat ina-assert natin siya. Dapat pinapanawagan natin siya sa kalsada. At sa kahit anong platform na meron tayo. In this response of the government, through NTF-ELCAC, through these armed forces, they use that power to silence dissent, to silence our demands, and that further causes us to be placed not just in a health crisis, but also in a human rights crisis, in a socio-political crisis. It also poses risks for us, for example, kapag nagdidiwang tayo ng Pride. For example, the Pride 20 dati, ng last year, napakulong sila just because they rallied despite of having the protocols being followed, kasi hindi talaga yung agenda ng government ay panatilihin sa bahay lang para maging safe ang mga mamamayan, kundi panatilihin sa bahay ang mga mamamayan para mapatahimik ito. At kumbaga, this also manifests how fascistic our state is. Sinasabi ko pala ito dahil naniniwala ako na yung ating panawagan sa trans self, yung ating panawagan sa trans community, hindi siya nag-e-exist sa vacuum. Largely connected siya sa panawagan sa laban ng ating mga batayang masa. As health advocates also try to alleviate this material conditions, as We still work para mapaabot yung mga nasa malayong communities ng better access sa GAT or gender-affirming hormone therapy or HIV consultations and antiretroviral treatment. Kailangan pa rin nating ma-remind na it is absurd na ginagawa ito ng mga advocates. Kasi first and foremost, dapat yan ay trabaho ng gobyerno. But of course, we care about one another, so we do our part, but we should be reminded that this is their responsibility. Just because we are compassionate of our members in the community, they shouldn't take advantage of it. Trans health in itself wouldn't be this bad kung maayos yung healthcare system natin. Pero it shows how bureaucrat capitalism is never really caring of our people, but of their personal gains. For me, being loud is not just about the grand gestures that we do for the advancement of our struggle, for the advancement of our community. It is not just about us winning titles in pageantry. It's not just about us taking up spaces in workforce. Although that has its essential or relevant help to the community. Being loud is not measured through those grand gestures, but being able to be there. It is not about us being brave enough to be loud, but of us being courageous enough to contribute to that collective loudness. We should always be reminded that we are not alone in this struggle. We are always along the basic masses, the sectors outside of our community, because we denominate with them. Gusto kong pagpugayan ang lahat ng naririto ngayon, ang lahat ng nanonood, nakikibaka, nakikiisa ngayon, may it be online, in the streets, legislative, may it be in stages of pageantry, those of us maximizing all the platforms, all the means to contribute to the struggle. Dahil through these efforts, we continue to persist, we continue to assert our rightful places in this society. Kahit may pandemic, hindi tayo papatigil. And that is such a great political statement in itself. Through this, we show our oppressors that we are not going anywhere, despite of what they do to us. And that speaks so much of our genuineness and strength collectively in this society. In a society that constantly puts us or manipulates us in its illusion of choice. I hope through this you get to see that we can always go beyond it and we are capable of being in whatever spaces we aspire to be. I hope we continue to break barriers, both personal and systemic. Now that the elections is coming near, but most importantly, remember that true power comes from the masses, from our united identity and collective efforts. That is genuine leadership, and that is what should be leading our country more than anyone, more than anything else.